Alright, YouTube, something I didn't see earlier, there's also an oil spill right now in Alabama that's like fucking everything up, including fuel prices. That's what everyone's fixated on. Fuck the environment, who cares if a bunch of fish die, as long as people can drive their cars. But there's perhaps more worrying environmental news. Now, I will preface this by saying I am a pragmatic and skeptical proponent of fracking. That is, I acknowledge it is not environmentally friendly. I want it to be used as a short-term stopgap measure while solar efficiency catches up. I think there are better ways to use it. My first recommendation: pay people to put solar panels on their homes instead of building them in tracts of fallow land out west. It's a lot more efficient. Build it on people's homes. Get rid of the federal licensing fees associated with it. Just get rid of them for like the next 10 years. Solar will take off. Things will advance. It will actually, because it'll be a more free market, there'll be a bigger incentive for private industries that dabble in solar to develop better and better panels. So I'll say that. But there's a new fault line in Oklahoma, and I have a feeling it probably extends quite a way into Kansas and down into Texas, considering where these quakes in this region, central Oklahoma, are branching out to. Apparently, fracking there has either caused or reactivated or something. Somehow it has affected a fault line there that they either didn't know about before and, oh shit, now all of a sudden it's evident and it's active, or was always there and it's just more active because of fracking, or maybe they opened up a whole new fault. I would think that you probably could open up a fault line if you were to make a line of fracking wells in the right pattern on the right geological stratum, and you then pump the earth full of this fluid and get things perhaps cracked apart and moving. Yeah, you could probably build a new fault line if you really wanted to, if the conditions were right. Unfortunately, it looks like they may have done that. I'm not sure whether this is authentically an old fault that was just like, it was inactive and now they've put it back into motion or whatever. But they've shut down a whole bunch of these fracking wells in the region of this actual fault line. Of course, Oklahoma has become the earthquake capital of the United States. Now, it's always been, like, California and Alaska have always been vying for the title of most likely to have the next big earthquake. Now we have, fairly regularly 3.0 to 4.0 quakes in Oklahoma. It's like a weekly basis now. Many, many, many smaller quakes and tremors. And occasionally, every few months, there seems to be something that's approaching 5.0. They had a 5.8, of course. I think it was near Pawnee, if I remember correctly. And that sort of let them know that something was going on there. Now, that was perhaps the biggest one that they will have. The problem is the quakes don't show any signs of slowing down. Just because they stop fracking this particular area, does that mean that it will go away? Well, if they've reactivated some, million-year-old extinct fault line in this region, it may take years or centuries to actually dissipate, or it may never do so. Maybe the Earth will literally start folding under right in the heartland, and you'll have a whole new ridge of mountains 100,000 years from now to contend with. It's entirely possible that that could happen. It's literally split the continent in two under the right conditions. I don't think that's likely. I don't think that's going to happen, but at least for the short term, they're going to have to deal with an increased level of seismicity there. Of course, what I've said before is as long as you're having these smaller and moderate quakes, things aren't quite as bad. If they suddenly go quiet, it means that pressure's building. That's also, when we're talking about earthquakes in the U.S., there's probably three places that would be the worst. One would be the New Madrid fault zone. It will eventually have another large earthquake. Unfortunately, because of the underlying geology, it will cause damage all the way up to Boston. Which means even here, you'd be able to feel the shaking from a quake that's a considerable distance away. It's closer to Florida than it is to New England. Another would be the Cascadia region off the coast of the Pacific Northwest. That is locked and ready to roll. And then, of course, California. But within Oklahoma, you have this smaller, yes, but quite active area in which there are now more measurable earthquakes than there are in all of California. It is now the most seismically active state. It dwarfs Alaska or California. It's right in the heartland. seismic activity there only happened once in a blue moon before fracking began. I think if you put two and two together, there's a pretty good indicator that that's what's causing these events. Now they say, oh, well, there's a fault line there. Oh, we should probably move these wells. Yeah, you think so? Maybe you should have done a little bit more exploring before you began fracking every region of the country in a wanton manner. I'm a proponent of using it at least short term, but be careful where you're actually doing this. Because it could, what, are you going to start fracking along the San Andreas fault line? Oh, well, we found there's a whole lot of fuel, so, fuck the risk. We're just going to put in a whole bunch of wells and start drilling this shit right out. Probably not the greatest of ideas. Probably end up with quite a few problems. Unfortunately, it looks like they put a lot of these fracking wells right above on formerly active and now formerly dormant, as of this moment, fault line. So yeah, there's going to be some problems there. I wouldn't be surprised if they have a 6.0. It was funny. Remember, the USGS said some time ago, I remember I made a video about this, oh, well, they could have a 5.0 quake there, which is, for that area, it's huge, honestly, for anything other than, like, California, Cascadia up into Alaska. Yeah, that's pretty big. It's almost unheard of within that region. That's, like, closer to the New Madrid size, I guess, than to what they would be used to in Oklahoma. You have like a 0.5 tremor, your dish rattled for 2 seconds. Okay, that's your earthquake for the year or something like that before this fracking began. It was funny because I remember saying, oh, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets higher than a 5.0, like a 5.5, maybe a 6.0. Then they have a 5.8 quake. Thankfully, because of where it hit, it didn't cause any considerable damage. But I can imagine that all the foundations in that area that are 0% quake resistant are probably suffering. You've got tales of, the odd broken window, dishes fell down, our foundation suddenly is cracked. Things are in motion. You look at parts of California, you can see the steady movement over time, even if no single quake is particularly large. You get these little, uneven bits of sidewalk, and you get, fences pulling out their posts, and foundations pull away from the sidewalk and stuff like that. It's slow motion over time, but you can see it visually. You can see the slow effects of these quakes putting things into motion. Well, now with all the foundations cracking and stuff in central Oklahoma, maybe we're going to start seeing that. You're going to start seeing people have to repeatedly repair everything because their state is literally in motion, at least short term. I would think it wouldn't do good things for their tourism. Not that I can imagine many people visit Oklahoma as tourists. I would like to. I've been through Oklahoma. I thought it was quite pretty. That being said, when I went through Oklahoma, it wasn't the seismic capital of the United States. It would have been very funny to roll through in a Greyhound and all of a sudden the Greyhound shaking a little bit more than normal, if you know what I mean. But yeah, there is apparently some sort of fault line there, whether it's entirely man-made, which would be quite astonishing. It'd be the first time in human history that anyone's managed to do that. I remember Hitler had some sort of plan, supposedly, to core into the Earth's crust a couple miles and drop an atomic bomb in it as sort of a doomsday weapon. The idea was to create a big earthquake and sort of use scorched earth to destroy the countryside so an advancing army wouldn't have necessarily the supplies that it would need to keep its formation or whatever. It's like a ludicrous plan. Of course, we do underground nuclear testing. I suppose if you dropped one in a 2-mile shaft drilled right into the San Andreas, you could cause a problem. Of course, the weapons they were working with were measured in the tens of kilotons, not in the tens of megatons like they are now. If only they had known about boosted fission back in the 1940s, probably could have laid waste to half of Central Europe. But yeah, it looks like man may have, for the first time, created a fault. Either that or there was a fault there and they were just too stupid to realize that when they began fracking it, and now they've woken it back up, at least short term. Hopefully it goes back to sleep. Now that they move the wells, maybe the activity will slowly decrease and it'll go away and it'll go back to normal and they just have to frack elsewhere. If that's found out, if it's found out that fracking only causes a seismic problem if it happens to be in proximity to a fault, then that would take care of one of the most major concerns people have about it. A lot of people think, well, there's a fracking, system nearby, it's going to cause a lot of earthquakes. Well, what if we find out that this is like a one-off? and the only time that happens is over a fault that could become active if it's fracked. That would at least help allay people's fears on that. Now, groundwater contamination and all that stuff, that's a totally different issue. But as far as the doomsday scenario sort of event, oh, we're going to have like an 8.0 earthquake because of fracking, I think that could go great ways towards alleviating people's fear. Again, at least in the interim. I mean, it's dropping fuel prices all over the place. It's really putting the screws to a lot of our competitor nations, like Russia, Venezuela, the OPEC, sort of the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula, generating a lot of income in the United States. So I say drill, baby, drill in the short term. But we need to use the money that we're saving, preferably, to prop up green energy so that we never have to rely upon those foreign states for oil again, number one. And number two, it's just cleaner. It makes everything healthier here. It's a selfish reason, too. Fuck like global warming stuff. It's just healthier. You know, you don't have all this the oil and gas and so forth being burned. It's easier, honestly, to do that. Hopefully we can figure out how to make solar panels that are, not just paper thin and efficient, but also we don't need some of these rare earth minerals that they have to strip mine for, unfortunately. If we can accomplish that, then no more problems. That's about all. Peace out.